Welcome back. I'm Anastasia, and my mission is to build a community of acceptance and authenticity. I needed some adventure buddies for this journey of insight, and I am so glad it's you. You are all welcome here, and I'm grateful that you decided to join me. This adventure we're going on today is with Nicole Breit, award-winning essayist and beautiful human being. She has an energy about her that is infectious, and I'm excited for all of you to hear her passion and love for who she has become now that she has welcomed all of who she is. We talk about how she has healed past trauma through writing and how this inspired her to start programs and organizations to help other traumatized souls find their path to healing. We also talk about who she has become and the freedom and light that she has found in life. She's only just getting started, and I'm so grateful that we got to hear her voice today. And before we get started, I do want to take a moment to thank my clothing partner, Occupied Mind, for being just as wild and outspoken as I am. Their belief is simple yet profound. Everyone deserves to feel at home in their own skin. Occupied Mind is Indigenous and queer owned, and I love them. Use code INSIGHTSWITH US15 at checkout to find a shirt or hoodie or beanie or blanket that speaks your mind and bears your soul. That's OCTOPIEDMIND.com. Use code INSIGHTSWITHUS15 at checkout. Be authentically you. Hi, welcome.
Hi, it's great to be here.
I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so glad to be here, Anastasia. Thanks so much for hosting me today.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about who you are, Nicole.
Sure, I'm Nicole Breit. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a queer, neurodivergent, award-winning essayist and a storywork coach based on Canada's Sunshine Coast in the Pacific Northwest near Vancouver. And I'm just really passionate about writing stories, writing creative nonfiction specifically, short form memoir, and helping other writers get their stories out into the world as well.
Okay. What would you define as a short form memoir? What is that?
So when people think of memoir, I think they often think of a traditional long form book. But short form memoir is an opportunity to write into the same material, but in shorter pieces, much like the stories that we wrote and shared in Pillow Talk. So those, what I call creative nonfiction or short form memoir interchangeably, can take lots of different shapes. I think working in short form allows us to be a lot more playful in how we tell stories. But the purpose is the same. We write short form memoir or creative nonfiction to know ourselves, to process emotions, to heal the past. And as a form of identity work too, so that we can continue to grow and evolve as humans.
That's so powerful. It's so beautiful. We're all trying to grow as humans and figure out who we are and how we want to show up in this world.
For sure. And I think writing is just such a powerful tool for that kind of evolution and transformation. It's been life-changing for me. And when I have coached writers in my courses, my workshops, then in one-to-one mentorships, I see how their lives change by owning their stories and honoring their stories. So it's very meaningful work.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I know I said that I wanted to talk about Pillow Talk, but I have follow-up questions. Tell
Sure.
me about that transformation, and maybe it's one that you've experienced, or is there like a way of transformation that you witness that just feels so powerful?
Yeah, well, I see writers move through heavy stages where they're still burdened by old stories that they haven't yet come to grips with into lighter, illuminated, radiant versions of themselves. And when I talk about short form memoir and creative nonfiction, I'm especially fond of it because whereas a long form memoir can take 10 years to write, we can have that same transformative experience very quickly by writing into those experiences in short form works, 1,000 words. It's amazing what can change when we allow ourselves to sit with our stories and honor the feelings and move through them. So I can think of many writers over the years. I've been teaching creative nonfiction since early 2017. So I've seen many writers go through this. But I would love to tell you a little bit about my own personal transformation, because I wouldn't be teaching this if I hadn't lived it.
100%. And
Yeah.
before you share, when did you
Mhm.
first start writing? Like, have you always been writing, or
Mhm.
was it a newer thing you discovered?
I started writing when I was just on the cusp of adolescence. I mean, I always loved language arts, and I loved, artwork as well. I think drawing can be a form of storying as well. It's visual communication, and we're taught that as youngsters. And I always loved those books that you had in primary school where it was like blank page up for half the top of the page and then writing below, because that, like storybooks, the visual illustration and the writing tell a story together. So I've always drawn to visual art and writing, but it wasn't until I was about 12 or 13 that I picked up journaling and writing in my diary. And it was certainly connected to the sense that I couldn't articulate verbally my big feelings, or when there was conflict or what was going on at home that I didn't feel I could express. Diaries and journals became the way that I came to understand what I thought and felt, and could release some of those emotions. So that was the beginning of it. And then I picked up writing poetry a little later in high school. And then when I went on to college, I took as many creative writing courses as I could in my arts degree. And I think I knew for a long time that I wanted to be a writer, but I wasn't really sure how anyone figured out how to do that. There were no clear, there was no clear guidance out there in the 90s when I was in my, early young adult years to figure out how to actually be a writer. And it wasn't until I did my second degree in education. I trained as an elementary school teacher, that I had a professor who shared a book of personal essays, Barbara Kingsolver's High Tide in Tucson. And that was when the light bulb went off, that you could write about your life as a story, the way that fiction could be a story, but about your real lived experience. And I didn't know that that was a thing.
Yeah.
And once I learned that, I had to figure out how to do it. I started writing personal essays in my mid-20s.
Yeah.
And that led me here to creative nonfiction and writing it, teaching it, all of that.
I
Mhm.
love the timeline that you described in
Mm.
that, because it was like you found this exploration when you started journaling that is like, okay, let me find my voice. Like, I'm almost using the journal to muddle
Mhm.
through what my experience is. And then you're like, well, this was powerful, but like, oh well. And
Just
then
lives in here.
it
No
just
one's
lives
gonna,
in
this
here.
isn't a story. This is just a mess. But out of the mess, we can shape stories and use, our own. Turning yourself into a character is a really interesting exercise. And one of the beautiful things that I found about it, and I think that is so healing for writers I've taught, is that it gives you distance. You're watching yourself almost cinematically sometimes, like moving through your life story, but you're the writer observing, witnessing. And that gives you a little bit of distance from actually feeling the feelings at the time you're writing, so that you can actually get it down. And that's different than writing as a diary, where I feel like I'm really in the feels versus watching myself move through something and then
Ooh.
seeing it maybe from a different perspective even.
In my work as a therapist, I use this metaphor called the sky metaphor,
Mhm.
where every time you look up at the sky, the weather patterns are different. Sometimes it's storming, sometimes it's sunny, sometimes it's, snowing or a blizzard or three things at once, because I live in Colorado and the weather is always multiple
Mm,
things at once.
right.
And when you're in it, like, you can be miserable if you're caught in the rain. If you don't
Mm,
like rain, I love rain, but that's a
me
whole
too.
other story.
Yeah, I
But then
live in
if
the
you
Pacific
go,
Northwest. If I didn't
yeah,
like rain, I should have
yeah.
moved. Yeah.
But if you like get in a plane and you go above the weather patterns, the sky is constant,
Mm,
and to the point that you can navigate by the stars. And so we all have these different weather patterns within us. We're storming, we're sunny, it's a blizzard, it's multiple things at once. And like, if you're stuck in the weather pattern, it feels almost too much to navigate.
Oh,
But
yeah.
if you zoom out, if you are the constant of the sky, that weather pattern, you can see how temporary it is. And you can move through it differently from this place of distance
Hmm.
than trying to navigate it in the pattern. And that's kind of what you're describing. That's how I'm seeing it.
Yeah. And the way you've articulated is a really beautiful extension of how I sometimes suggest to writers that they take cloud view, like proximity to their story. When you zoom it up and out, gives them that distance we're talking about. That's so important to be able to actually move through really difficult material that's been unprocessed. But I love the way you described it, because both of those realities are the same. The feeling, shifting feelings and shifting ways of experiencing the same event, but get a little bit further above. And yeah, things become a little more clear and navigable. Beautiful. Now I'm going to use that. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Is that
take
okay
it.
if I
It's
borrow it?
yours. Go
Okay,
for
thank
it. It's
you.
from acceptance and commitment therapy. It wasn't even mine. So,
Oh, okay. It's great.
yeah,
It's
it's there
great.
for all of us to use. And I love, like you said, you had this powerful experience, and now you get to help others have that
Mhm.
experience, find their voice, find their journey. What is it like to be able to teach that to others?
Well, it's phenomenal. And it's something that I feel that I live every day. And that's where I think also I might be a little different than other teachers of memoir and creative nonfiction, is that I really feel that I live a real world application of having storied the past. And if I could share a little bit about that,
Yeah.
that's the story of transformation that immediately came to mind when you asked the previous question. Content warning. I'm going to talk a little bit about some teenage trauma. When I was 16, my first love died suddenly, and unexpectedly. And I did not have the tools nor the resources to process or grieve that experience. I actually stopped writing in my diary for about 4 months. I went back and looked when I was ready to come to grips with this story many years later. Once I had been writing creative nonfiction for a little while, personal essays, I knew that it was a story that I had never healed and that one day I wanted to write about. But every time I thought about it as a very big memoir length story that I would never be able to do justice to. I took a course, my first creative nonfiction course in 2014, and one of the first stories that I tried to write in a very short form was about that experience of loss. And as a therapist, you know about disenfranchised griefs and delayed griefs, and that it can stay. For me, it stayed frozen in time, and that experience of finally, it took me about 2 years to write in a collection of short works, linked, connected stories. It took me about 2 years to feel like I had exhausted the material and appropriately grieved. But those stories became the first stories that I ever had published. And I won an award for one of them. That then became the beginning of everything for me as a published author and eventually a teacher, because I had learned so much about grief and writing. I even did a certificate in narrative therapy because I felt called to do that as a result of wanting to just learn more about what I'd experienced, even just by writing into grief
Yeah.
so intimately and openly. And it wasn't just that I was telling the story. I had discovered a way of telling the story that allowed me to access those big feelings that had never been processed without feeling the overwhelm that a lot of people feel will happen if they write about trauma or grief or loss. And so I'm going to go a little bit this way, and then I will bring it back.
I
I
trust
promise I'll
you.
bring it
I'm
back. Yeah, I
along for
know
this ride.
we've got trust here. I took a course on a form called the lyric essay, and this landed so beautifully for me because I had written poetic, poetry, and was also interested in prose and the personal essay. It kind of marries the two. But what's really fun about the lyric essay is that it it's like puzzle work. It's like when you you have the creative ability to write, maybe it's going to be in the form of a crossword puzzle or a menu. Like maybe you've seen stories that take the form of a recipe or a WebMD. Suddenly I actually wrote that first story about this loss in the form of a play. I actually just took the format of a play and tried to write it. It was called teen drama. It was kind of making a little bit fun of myself because it wasn't overly dramatic.
Say
to
a
be
way that was
very
accessible for you to
accurate.
even start telling this story.
Exactly. Whereas I did not even know where to begin because it was so messy in my brain. By just putting a stake in the ground and saying, I'm going to write this as a play, I now have parameters and it can only be this long. So I can only write as much as will fit. And that was my portal. That was my entryway in. And I just kept doing that again and again in different formats. And so I had discovered that this technique or this approach helped me sidestep the emotional weight because I was mentally trying to figure out how I was going to do this in a small space. And then it allowed me to get through that first draft. And then when I read it back, I felt the feels. But I had gotten through the draft. It was something I could never figure out how to do. I'd always done it in a very detached, thinky way that didn't bring me any relief. It just made me feel like it had missed the point because I needed and wanted to feel what I had been pent up in my heart.
You wanted to press play on what had paused.
Exactly. And I wanted to be real and honest about it, but I also was really trying to protect myself. What I discovered was that when I taught other writers how to write lyric essays, they had the same experience. I never could figure out how to write this before. I was stalling. I felt too overwhelmed to even start. Now I can do this. I figured out a way how to do this. And so a number of writers that I've worked with over the years have now published memoirs in the form of these fragmented, shorter pieces and gotten them out in the world. And had that healing experience that we all know that expressive arts and writing, there's lots of research about how deeply transformative that can be. But if you can't figure out how to do it, if you can't bring yourself to start, you're not going to have that experience. So once I had written, I said it took about 2 years, and I had started publishing this work and then teaching. Over time, I identify as queer. I'm a bisexual woman who had literally pressed pause on relationships with men for years because I couldn't navigate them because of this thing that hadn't been healed. And so my story in Pillow Talk is really special to me because it was the first story in which I returned to that aspect of my identity and being willing and able and ready to be in emotionally intimate and physically intimate relationships with men from a healed place where I could actually be successful relating that way in a way that I never could have if I hadn't storied that.
Well, and healing
first.
in its own right too, because you got to get to know that part of you in this healed way too.
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many aspects of it, from the gained confidence to the, what happens when we access our creativity, how we feel about ourselves when we look at what we've been through and can look at ourselves with compassion, that cloud view that we were talking about. And I knew myself so well for having written back into my teenage years and being able to see how not grieving had impacted my relationships with men for so long. And and now I'm in a really lovely connection with someone. And it was a little bumpy to find that connection, but I couldn't be in it if I hadn't done this work, done the story work. So that's a real life, tangible impact for having done that work, taken the time, made the space to do it. And it's brought so much joy into my life to be a fully expressed and out polyamorous woman whose, life looks very different from the other moms that I meet. I have, grown kids who know that's just part of my identity and part of my marriage. And if they read my books, they're going to read about it. And it's really joyful to have unmasked and to be a fully expressed, be as true to my true self as possible. And again, I don't know how I would have arrived at this place if it hadn't been for narrating intimately my life.
I'm having a reaction to this that I'm
Mhm.
curious if it resonates for you
Mm.
because, it sounds like as you're sharing this story and going through this timeline, you actually honored where you were in each phase of this story. Like
Mhm.
when you didn't have the tools and it wasn't accessible, like your body basically numbed you from it because you needed to
Yes.
survive it with numbness.
Yes.
And then when
Yes.
you wanted to access it, you wanted to heal it, but you had no idea how, like you still let it sit for a while before you found the piece that felt right. And then
Mhm.
you honored, how am I going to go through it in this smaller way in order to access what has felt so inaccessible this whole time, which then led to you feeling this alignment that you're describing now in your current life. Like through every phase, you were honoring who you were and what you needed in the moment, even if you didn't even know what that was.
That's a really beautiful perspective. I didn't see it that way at the time. I think in the early survival years, I often just felt that there was something flawed about me and that I wasn't attractive. I had told myself stories about why things weren't working out, and of course, when you're younger, no one has themselves figured out. It's very rare to really have a deep, truly aligned connection when you're still figuring yourself out in your 20s. But it's especially difficult when you've been through something like this. And um, but I suppose by, as I kind of bumbled through my 20s, I guess I wasn't really ready to access it. And it wasn't until I was, in my early 40s that I would have had the tools or also maybe the will or the space to explore it and also know that it meant stopping time in a way. I was pretty busy raising kids and doing other things leading up to being in my early 40s and ready for this. And
You had to honor that too.
yeah, there were other things unfolding that needed that time. So I think it did work out, and I did have support. I did go to counseling because there was a certain point in the story where I realized I can't do this alone. And it actually was a really beautiful thing because I was very supported to follow my own instincts on this journey. And when I said to my therapist, I think I just need to read these stories to you. Is that okay if I just show up and read what I'm writing? And she embraced it. Just said, you know what you need. I'm here. I'm here to support you with whatever you know that you need. And we would both cry. She would cry with me when I
Of
read
course.
my
Oh,
stories.
what a powerful experience.
It was. And I think it actually accelerated the healing process. I think to have someone being my witness, I was witnessing my younger self, but both of us, my 40-year-old self and my younger self, were being witnessed by my therapist. And I don't think if I'd have had that, I would have moved through it as quickly as I did, which was good. When you think of how many years my heart was locked down, to be able to move through it within 2.5 is pretty incredible.
I mean, it's amazing. And it's so challenging to let yourself be witnessed in your pain.
Mhm.
And, the fact that you write these stories and you help other people write these stories where it's going to be witnessed in print. And then it's
Mhm.
another to read it aloud to another human being and like see my pain as it's
Mhm.
happening almost.
Sure. We're taught to hide it. We're not supposed to show our pain. We're supposed to be invincible.
Yeah.
I really felt that.
Well, and that reminds me of your story in Pillow Talk. We're
Mm.
not meant to share, not just in pain, but in
Yeah.
pleasure. It's supposed to
Yes.
stay hidden. And the
Mhm.
whole point of your story is why. This
Mhm.
doesn't make sense. Let's let it out. And that
Mhm.
was, I mean, again, just this word of it's so powerful.
Mhm.
And I'm curious how you came up with that idea of the letters.
Oh, okay. Well, the story that my collaborator Claire and I submitted to Pillow Talk exist in their own memoir in letters. So
Okay.
we had been working on our book Bloom, Letters on Girlhood, for several years, and had been a part of awfully hilarious period pieces. So we already had one of our letter exchanges published in that collection. And so when Pillow Talk came along, I mean, I'm all about desire, pleasure, the fact that we should own it, the fact that women should be talking about it and like
Mhm.
mapping out those experiences that haven't
This is why
really
we're
been.
friends.
Yes, this is why we're friends. I was all over it. I knew that there was something in Bloom that would fit, that we could easily find a letter exchange that would fit. And so the format was already there. The idea was always that Claire and I would write about our experiences growing up as young women under the patriarchy in 1980s Vancouver. And it was Claire's idea. It was her idea to invite me to be a part of a project with her where we got to know each other and processed our experiences through letters. So I love it as a format. I think it's so intimate and it put me at ease right away. I forgot that anyone but Claire would be reading my letters. And I think that really made it easier for me to be as candid as I was. And it wasn't until Claire and I were offered publishing deal that I went, oh no, what to, I never actually believed that maybe we would have an audience where, like a part of me just maybe didn't want to believe that my mom might read stuff or whatever, which I would have censored myself a little bit. And I'm just glad that it worked out as it did. And by the time the Pillow Talk invitation came around and our letter exchange was accepted, what was really delightful was working with an editor who then had us revisit the story and see if we could add a little more humor to it. I'm actually more fond of the version in Pillow Talk than in Bloom because of that. I think it was an expansion of maybe my true voice is a little more goofy and funny than I think would be indicated if you read a lot of my other creative nonfiction. It's very serious.
Yeah.
So I feel like Pillow Talk is just the letters became even more playful and fun. And
Well, and that's
yeah,
that
and sexy
cloud
too.
view, right? Of like, I'm in it and it feels harder and it is more serious. And then as we go through this work and we do the work and we show up differently, that you can find the other aspects of your voice in.
Mhm. It's true. And we can tell the same story and the same material in so many ways, which is, I think, what's so interesting about creative nonfiction, too. When I was reading about that early romantic loss, the events don't change, but the perspective can. And the way that I treated the same events in different pieces allowed me to come at it from different angles, which is a very narrative therapy like
Yeah, you get to
idea that you
decide.
can you can tell the same story many, many different ways and they're all true. And so, yeah, just I think sort of the same case with the letter that originated in Bloom and then became something a little bit different in Pillow Talk.
Yeah, like you get to decide what story you hold on to when you walk
Mhm.
away from what you wrote.
Mhm. It's true. It's very powerful. I've used the word empowering, but I actually love the word powerful because empowering kind of suggests that we have to find our power somewhere else. The power really is centered in us and our relationship to our stories, which makes it just such important work. Everything is story.
Yeah. Well, and I can feel the passion radiating off of you.
Mhm, mhm.
That this has not just transformed your life, but has given you a purpose. to help others
Mhm.
transform their lives in the same way.
Absolutely. A large number of writers that I've worked with have done a lot of healing work and talk about how the work that we do and how I teach dovetails so nicely with therapy, which, in another life, I could imagine myself becoming a sex therapist or, counseling people through grief. I feel like this is really compatible work with that therapeutic, but in, yeah, in a creative, artistic way that
Okay.
feels very natural to me as well.
Who is your ideal client? Like if a listener is listening to this
Mm.
episode is going, "Ooh, wait, can I do this?"
Mhm. My ideal client is Carol Vastafali. I hope she watches this. We worked together for a year, and she's a founding member of the community that I just started earlier this year called the Revolution Story Lab. And so when Carol and I worked together, I remember saying to her as time went on and we were getting closer and closer to completing our year together, I don't want to work with anyone unless they're just like you. She's just so radiant and, endured such a difficult childhood and is a force of love and like, like you can meet two people who have been through very similar experiences, and some people don't make it. They don't find a way to gather their resources and move past what's happened to them. And then there are other people who somehow pull together whatever internal strengths they have and they find their way. They make something beautiful. They make a beautiful life. And then they help others. And that is, I think, my ideal client, somebody who wants to make something beautiful out of whatever happened to them and is willing to approach it with, you know, with the intimacy required to really get to the truth. No, knowing that there's no absolute truth, but our own truths, to find our own truths, because those truths are powerful and they're inspiring. And those kinds of stories move other people to tell stories. And then we have this collective healing possible.
I'm imagining as you're describing this, working with you and just
Mm,
how much trust and support
mm,
that you would bring to that space. Like people
mm.
choosing to be intimate with their story, but also be vulnerable in letting you witness it.
Mhm.
There has to be such a strong bond in work.
Absolutely. And that's something that I think I've understood in my bones because I felt silenced for so very long and only trusted my own story in a diary. That if I was ever going to help someone else hold it, I knew what would be required, that trust you're talking about, that you understand as a therapist, someone who's being there to hold and witness pain and growth and healing. It is, I almost feel like I might cry because it's when people tell me that they feel comfortable with me or that they trust me or that they've been able to share a story that they didn't ever know, excuse me, that they could write or even talk about. I feel so incredibly humbled. And yeah, I feel proud too that my journey took me to a place where I could be of real service to other people because I do believe we desperately need, like, we are in an urgent state where we need people to feel like they can tell the truth about their lives.
And have this sacred space where you're not just telling the truth, but somebody's going to believe you.
Absolutely.
Somebody's going to hear it and hear
Hmm.
you and lift you up in story.
Hmm. That's exactly why I created the Revolution Story Lab. And I was telling you, Carol Vastafali is one of my, I'll never have another client like her. I've worked with lots of writers that, of course, I have a real connection with, but Carol signed on as a founding member. So now she's a leader in this collective that we're co creating for writers who want to do this work together. for the very many reasons anyone would want to write about their lives. The writers in the room, like me, do have aspirations to share their stories and get published. So we talk about that, but it's that trusted collective space where we're talking through the process of writing our stories, supporting each other, cheering each other on, setting intentions, doing follow-ups. I did something really unusual with the Revolution Story Lab. It's not like an online pop-up community where it's unmoderated. I actually hired a nervous system aware community manager who isn't a writer, but who holds the space so that even when I'm not there, it is safe and people can be their vulnerable, open selves, and they're supporting each other, knowing there are guidelines. And I think that that is something that, especially among writers of memoir and creative nonfiction, we need to have because of the nature of taking our clothes off, like really getting naked. We don't get the transformation if we're not willing to go deep into truth. But we can't do that easily alone. And we can't do that easily unless we feel safe, that trust you're talking about. So I've created a collective that allows people to feel that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And that was why, when my teaching before, I never hosted communities because I felt so keenly and intensely how quickly that could go badly. And if even one person felt shut down or misunderstood or criticized for their choices, it's not like being in a fiction writing critique group. You're actually talking about people's lives. Yeah. I couldn't host anything like that, which meant that something really important was missing from my teaching until I recognized the missing piece is community. The missing piece is creating a space that feels like it is to be with me one-on-one, but where as many people who want to be in the room can be there together.
Can anyone sign up for this? Is it a small group? Do you have to apply?
There's no application process and there's no cap on how many members can apply. It's been set up. I think of it like a hive. So I'm the bee who created this thing, and I get to do what I love in Revolution Story Lab, which is to teach. I get to go away and learn and come back and create a training of some sort, and I transmit the message, and then the hive supports each other. It's a very matriarchal vision for how a collective can work. And so like the founding members have worked with me for a long time. And so they know how I teach and what I teach inside out. And so they're able to support new members as they come in and welcome them. And they're able to form their own clusters and rooms if they want to have their own groups where they share work or they have a specific interest. The vision is that it can continue to expand and be supported with the community manager there and the more senior, for lack of a better word, members. We call them revolutionaries. So
I love it so much.
Okay.
All right. I want to know about this other memoir that you are currently writing, have written.
Okay.
I love the title of it.
Which even I forget sometimes because
I have it written down so I can read it.
I have to go like this when I'm saying it.
Yeah. Queer, poly, kinky, anxiously attached neurodivergence guide to surviving an online long-distance relationship.
You got it. You nailed it.
I love it. I haven't even read it yet. And it's just, there's so many different pieces. I'm like, wait, I want to know about this. Wait, this. Wait, that. Ooh, how does this tie in? Like, it's so encompassing.
It's all the parts.
Yeah.
All the parts coming together. And I think there's research out there that there is a lot of crossover in the neurodivergent community and the queer community and the polyamorous community. And those of us who are really intentional about relationships are aware of our attachment style. And that's really important for having healthy connections. And I think a lot of us, particularly, because of the pandemic, have had long distance connections or connections that had to become distant. And I was just really interested in exploring how digital intimacy isn't something that I've read a lot of books about. And yet it is a thing. Meeting people online and forming connections, regardless of where geographically you're located, is something I would want to read more about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a memoir. It's about a real relationship that ended suddenly and triggered all of my wounds, but also was a real mirror for growth, for my growth. I again can say with confidence that if I hadn't had that relationship, it was the first really healing romantic relationship, and to me, it makes sense maybe that it was physically distant as I was getting my heart ready to be able to love a guy.
I think
A guy who,
distance allows for some forms of safety as you open up
yes,
emotionally.
it's true. And yet, energetically, it is entirely possible to feel very intimately connected with someone
Yeah.
through Snapchat or texting or videos or video calls. And um, yeah, it's something that I hope people will be excited to read about. And even if they don't have a identify in all the ways I do, or haven't necessarily experienced an intimate digital relationship, that there is something very universal about longing and a desire to belong and a desire to grow and connect with another person.
Yeah. Is this short form, long form, short form that
Mhm.
brought into a bigger piece? Like
Yeah. Well,
what is the format?
the second part of the title that I drop off, like imagine that whole title and then colon how-to articles for every season of a profound yet precarious romance. So it's written in the form of how-to articles. And
Okay.
that came about, that's called known as a hermit crab essay, when you adopt another form. We were talking about lyric essays before, as a way to hold a story. And in the days following an abrupt shift, we didn't want to call it a breakup, but it was a shift. We weren't going to be in a romantic relationship anymore. Um, I really thought about all the things that I had learned or that I had needed to learn in order to be in this relationship. And it was like a creative download. Have you ever had that experience where you just suddenly have to channel out a bunch of information? It was like, it came to me, all of the things that I had learned in between 150 and 200 how to article titles, like the kinds of things you would type into a search engine at 3 a.m.,
I love
like
this.
how to heal your body image issues when your intimate relationship is through photos and videos. Like that was something I kept coming back to, is that yes, I would take sexy selfies, but I would crop them so that if I wasn't comfortable with a part of my body, he would never see it. So then would he really have been attracted to me if we'd seen each other in person, was my fear. So those kinds of like questions like that, or yeah, I just had like a whole bunch of them, and I envisioned them as a series of hyperlinked how-to articles, as though I was the search engine to answer the questions that I was asking myself about all the things that I needed to learn to be in this
I
relationship
love
and then
how your
grieve it.
brain works.
So I was diagnosed with ADHD
Uh-huh.
a few months after this relationship ended, and my partner had ADHD. And so when I think about a neurodivergent brain, I think of a very webby, where so many things are kind of hyperlinked and are connected in my mind. And so that also kind of made sense as a frame or format for a book, because that diagnosis was a really important piece of me understanding myself and how I loved and how I thought and how I experienced the world. And so for it to feel like being in a neurodivergent brain with all the hyperlinks, and it actually broke open, and I'm thinking of it now as a multimedia memoir. I actually think it has to be an electronic literature project, because I want to drop in selfies and I want to gamify it. So it was originally going to be a book of essays. And I think it still could, just like we were talking about, there's many ways to approach the same material. I think it could be, but it would feel very flat and limited if it didn't really represent, what it is to be, in a digital romance.
Yeah. Well, and to be in a neurospicy brain in a digital
Hmm.
romance,
For sure.
because it
For
does
sure.
hop around and there's multiple platforms that you could be communicating on all at the same time. And
Hmm.
there's so much complexity within
Hmm.
online relationships, especially these days.
Absolutely. For sure.
Mhm.
For sure.
And you said, excuse me, you said as you were kind of coming up with this idea or writing this idea, how it shifted. But
Hmm.
you also said that you were working to open your heart.
Hmm.
And I'm curious if you feel like your heart is open now.
My heart is so fully open all the time. And it's because I wrote about that first loss. And then I found out what it meant in this relationship, that the Queer Poly Kinky Guide is about, because I don't think I had ever been in a relationship that was quite so expressive. And I was really longing to feel desired and desirable and to be seen and known really deeply. And my partner gave me that. We never met in person, but he told me every day, that I was beautiful and was very deeply interested in, all the things that I wanted to share. We would record very long voice notes for each other. And so there was a deep intimacy that allowed me to know a kind of love that I hadn't before, specifically with men. That kind of deep connection that I had been longing for a very long time was possible. And so we can do a lot of growth work on our own, but being loved by someone else, there is no substitute for feeling that radiate back at you and show you who you are. I started to see myself through their eyes, which gave me a different kind of self-love, if that makes any sense, to see yourself reflected through someone's eyes that you love, who
Trusting that
can.
you can be loved.
Yeah, there was so much to it. Um and then I carried that with me. Like, I was very heartbroken, but as a neuro spicy woman with ADHD might do, I went right into hyperfocus and I wrote the very first draft of this book in 3 months, 124,000 words. I woke up every morning because that was how I was going to grieve it. I was not going to hold on to my grief for decades. I was going to stop time and use my resources and work on it now while I was feeling it. And that meant that I was able to move through that. I call it snake season. Snake season, when you have been dramatically changed by loss and you are in the process of becoming someone else, but you're not there yet. And that's why you need to grieve it now,
Well,
so
and
that you
what a
can become
difference.
the next version of yourself. And so it took about 3 months, and I did some ritual and some ceremony. You might like this I kept seeing snakes everywhere. And I knew that it was meaningful. And I bought myself a pair of snake earrings, actually, that I was wearing while I was in this grief season.
Okay.
And then it was November 1st, and I think it was a new moon. And so I wanted to do a witchy ceremony. And I embodied Medusa. I made myself this headband. And like there was all the Halloween YouTube tutorials, but it was not Halloween. It was November 1st. And I like braided my hair up around these wires. And my son saw me in the morning. I started at 5:30 so that I could spend my whole day as Medusa. And he said, I don't even want to ask. And I said, it's okay, honey. Your mom's an artist. I just have to do my stuff. So then it became very funny when I went to drive him to school, and I could barely get my head in the car, and I could barely shoulder check because my hair was scraping, scraping. But what all of this is to say is that I think following our intuition in how we need to grieve is so important to our healing because after I did that ritual, snake season ended, I had a clear idea of what I now wanted. And then I was able to call that into my life, the next relationship that was meaningful and, filled in the spaces that I didn't have filled in with that other relationship. But I couldn't have been there if I hadn't have, continued to keep my heart open, like really, really intentionally resist the idea of shutting down and staying open because you can't, if you want to feel love and joy, you're not going to be able to feel it if you're trying to keep out sadness and pain. You have to keep it open or you won't feel any of the good things.
Well,
So,
and you said something around this story from when you were a teenager that
mhm,
you needed to get through, and how finding that way, doing that work, feeling that pain
mhm,
allowed you to open your heart so that you could be ready for the next things. And
mhm,
then the next time grief came around, you had those tools. You knew what it meant to sit in it and you trusted your ability to do so. So you didn't
mhm.
need to numb the way you needed to before. It was a
That's right.
completely different experience, but that first experience informs your
Mhm.
present experiences and helps you have that openness.
Absolutely. I wasn't willing to live a small life anymore. I wasn't willing to sacrifice joy to avoid hurt. I'd
I'm going to
already
get
learned.
hurt,
I
so
learned
and I'm going to
that.
feel that joy.
Yep, absolutely. I had learned what not to do.
It shows.
It's interesting that you say that. I've had friends over the last few years see pictures of me on social and say, "You are aging in reverse. You are radiant." I'm 52. I'm going to turn 53 next month. And I look younger now than I did 20 years ago in pictures. And I
So
think
you're
it's because I've
finally
done the
letting it
healing.
go.
Yep. And I've unmasked and I know myself. I know who I am. I love who I am. And that physically has had a transformation for me. People tell me my eye color is brighter. I think I'm just able to share my light.
Well, and there's so much to share.
There's so much for all of us to share.
We get to share in it.
Exactly.
It's not just, oh, I have some light, here you go. It's I'm going to share my light so that you can glow. Like, I want to see your light
Hmm.
too.
Yes. I want to see your light too. I want to read your stories. I want to hear the stories. Even if people aren't writing, I think, you know, um, the seekers, the meaning makers, the people who, want to know themselves and want to grow, those are my people. Like I have all the time in the world for conversations with people who are curious about you know, their own experiences and want to connect, want to share. It's always interesting to me. I noticed this when I first started reading my work aloud is that sometimes people would come up to me after a reading and say, "So this thing happened to me and it's not exactly like your story, but I really want to tell you because I also felt loss." And that is an amazing gift to me, is that just by telling a story, and it can be really scary to get up there and talk about something that's hurt you. But the beautiful thing that happens is people feel compelled to say things out loud that they might not tell family members.
You get to shine a
And
light on it, and then the shadows weaken. They're not as scary, they're
it's
not as
true.
strong, and you can feel that connection and community in that shared story.
It's so beautiful. It's
That's why I
so
love Pillow
beautiful.
Talk.
I love Pillow Talk too. I love Pillow Talk. It's
Mhm.
so joyful
It
and
is, while also
fun.
full of pain. Like, it is
Yes,
constantly
you're
back
right.
and forth, and that's everything we're talking about today.
It's true.
And the fact that Pillow Talk connected us too. And I've
Mhm.
met so many other authors, and I think I still have two that I'm meeting with through Pillow Talk.
Lovely.
And
Oh,
everyone
yeah.
has such vast experiences, but there's always this theme of I needed to share. I wanted to be seen.
Mhm.
I couldn't be quiet anymore. I wanted
Yes.
to let it go.
Mhm. Yes. Yes. I love stories, that the pineapples in the snow,
Yeah.
hate, when we talk about mapping stories that haven't been mapped before and going to a cake party or, I just love again, it comes back to the word intimacy. The invitation to let someone into your intimate life is sacred. And, so beautiful.
And stories do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. Is there anything we did not talk about that you feel compelled to share today?
Well, I wanted to be prepared for a conversation. And so a couple of the things that you said in the email was, were there any teasers or anything like that?
Yes.
And I did talk about how this was the first piece that I wrote after dipping my toes back into ethical non-monogamy after a very long period of time. But if people are interested in the title of the letter exchange, it's Tuning Guitars and Wet Kisses. And so this is maybe not so much a teaser as a spoiler. And I think that's okay because we want people to be interested and read the book. But tuning guitars is a euphemism for masturbation. Came up with in my 20s, like tuning my guitar. And so if you're just looking at the title and going, why would I read Tuning Guitars and Wet Kisses? Like I'm into wet kisses, tuning guitars, maybe you're into as well.
Yeah. And if you've never done it, maybe you want to try and see if you're into it.
Find out. Find out. I'm really like all about like, let's get rid of shame. Please, can we just get rid of shame and normalize human sexuality and our experiences? Please. There's no other way except to talk about it.
Yeah. We have to talk about it in order,
Mhm.
again, to shine that light on it so that
Mhm.
the shadows can disappear.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yes. One story at a time. We're going to do this work. We're going to change the world. I can feel it.
Absolutely. And it really can be as doable as one story at a time before you tell yourself, this is going to be too hard. My story is too painful. I am a real fan of the 100 word story. We do weekly challenges in Revolution Story Lab of just 100 words because it is something that everyone can do in a week. And even in a very short piece like that, you can get that relief and that release and that released breath that feels like you might need 300 pages to let go of, but maybe you can even do it in 100 words.
Well, and, sharing your story, yeah, maybe there's a bigger story in there, but
Hmm.
maybe you can just start with 100 words.
Hmm. Yeah, there are memoirs written as collections of 100 word stories. I love that approach, just a piece by piece by piece, small fragments collected together can make a whole book.
Well, and it's the same with the healing journey.
Hmm.
As a therapist, like you don't just start with the heaviest stuff or the
Hmm.
stuff that you're afraid to go to. You start with what feels manageable, what
That's
you
right.
can sit in. And then over time, you trust your ability to sit in anything. And then
Hmm.
you get to the heavier, darker stuff that you haven't been looking
Hmm. Yeah, it makes sense.
at. Okay. How can people find you? How can people find your Revolutionary Story Lab? Are you on social media?
Yes, I am ADHD, and so that means I'm consistent nowhere.
Love it.
But my favorite place to show up is Instagram, and it's the.nicole.breit, the Nicole Breit. That's where you'll find me. I think the best place is just to go to NicoleBreit.com. So NicoleBreit.com. We are at the moment working on a website for Revolution Story Lab. So you can also go to revolutionstorylab.com, but it might be a little while before it's all up and running, but there will be a link from NicoleBreit.com.
Amazing. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Anyone
And
interested in learning about Revolution Story Lab could also just email me.
of course. And,
Mhm.
I'll probably put a link in my bio on Instagram whenever it's live as well, because this sounds amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any last thoughts before I hit stop?
Just thank you. So grateful for a conversation. We covered so much ground, and it was such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story. Does anyone else feel like signing up for Nicole's writing program? Because I am tempted. It sounds powerful and an adventure in and of itself. And hopefully something we talked about today resonated with you, fit for you. And if it did, let yourself sit with that idea for a little while longer. If you have any questions for this podcast, send us a message on Instagram at Insights With Us Podcast, or send us an email at insightswithus@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please follow, like, or subscribe. If you want to support the continuation of this podcast, you can donate. To do so, you can follow us and support us on Substack, or find me, Anastasia Soroka, on buymeacoffee.com. You can find digital downloads on my website, happymindwellness.com. Thank you for being my adventure buddy. I am so glad that you are here, and I appreciate you for being you. Thank you for creating insight with us.